Hi everyone, I hope you guys are doing good. So as a part of our Postgres tutorial series, in last lecture we learned about Postgres exception handling. Now in this lecture we will learn about Postgres triggers. So without wasting time, let's start. So first I will go in Postgres documentation. So this is Postgres SQL 17 documentation and this is a create trigger doc. Okay, so let's understand the syntax of create trigger. Okay, so syntax is very simple. So create or replace and then give the trigger name, right? And then the event on which it should fire before, after, instead of, right? And then give the table name on which you are defining the trigger, right? And then if you are referencing, so we can use referencing keyword old as old or new if you want to change the table name, right? So you can write here old table or new table, what would be the name for that? We'll see this in our demo. And then we have for each row or a statement, right? So this defines like this is a row level trigger or a statement level trigger, right? We'll see the difference also between row and statement level trigger. And this is the when condition, right? When it should be applicable, the condition if you want to apply any condition, right? And then execute the function, right? So basically in Postgres, you just execute a function in your trigger, right? So this is the complete definition of a trigger, right? So you have to define this function, right? And then bind that function with this trigger, right? So this is the basic syntax, right? One table is very important in this, so that what I wanted to show you. So this is a when. When is like before, after, instead of, right? And then there is a event, right? Event is insert, update, delete, or truncate, right? So before insert or before update, before delete, or before truncate, right? So this is the when and event combination, right? And this is the row label trigger. If you want to define a row label trigger, so that can be defined only on tables and foreign tables, right? And if you want to define a statement level trigger, so that also can be defined on tables, views, and foreign tables, right? So view is not there in the row label trigger, right? So this table you can always refer, right, to understand like which kind of event we can define on which kind of tables or views, right? And can and what kind of trigger we can define. Is it a row level trigger or a statement level trigger, right? So this table you can refer to understand which kind of trigger can be defined on tables or views, right? Okay, so now I let's jump to the demo part. Okay, so I have prepared some script to demo you guys about the Postgres trigger. Okay, so this is my PG admin. Okay, so in PG admin we have in Object Explorer we are going to use the employee database, right? So we have four database. So in employee database, let's go inside the schema and in the tables, right? So we have right now employee and department table, right? So employee table on this we are going to create a trigger. Okay, so let's first see the data in this employee table. Okay, so let me open a query tool and let me just run this query. Select star from employee, order by employee ID, right? So this is my employee table which has six rows, right? And it has employee ID, department ID, employee name, employee role, and employee salary. Okay, so now we are going to create a trigger on this employee table which will record all the updates in the salary. Okay, so if there is any update happening on this employee table and we are going to update the salary, okay, then all the salary updates should be logged in another table using a trigger. Okay, so we'll see that example. Okay, so this is the employee table, right? So let's create a log table in which our trigger will keep the entry for all the salary updates. Okay, so let me just create this table. Okay, so this is the table. Let's see the definition of the table. So table name is employee salary update, right? So it will note all the salary update for each row, right? So first column is ID, which is a identity column, right? So it will be a generated identity column. All the sequence will get generated automatically. We don't need to enter anything. and then employee ID, it will note the old salary, it will note, and new salary also it will note, and when it is updated, right? So timestamp it will date up note, right? So if you'll update any particular row, right, so it will note your employee ID, right? Old salary, what was the old salary, what is the new salary also, and then when the update is happening on this table, right? So this is the work of this table, right? So this is a log table we are going to create. So let's create this table. So table got created. Let's check that in our object explorer. Okay. So employee salary updates got created, right? This table got created now. Let's understand. Okay, so we are first understanding the row level trigger. Okay, so row level trigger are defined like this, right? So create trigger, trigger name. After we are going to create a after trigger, right? So after update on this employee table, right? So for each row, it's a row level trigger. So it is identified by this keyword for each row, right? So if it's a statement level trigger, it will be for each statement, right? And then execute procedure, and this is the function, right? So it is going to execute this procedure, right? So this is our row label trigger, right? So let's create this trigger. So let me just paste it here and let's create this trigger. Okay, so trigger name is trigger employee salary update, right? This is created on this employee table, right? And this is going to execute this function, right? So we'll define this function later. Okay, so the trigger got created, right? Now it's time to define this function log employee salary update, right? So this is our trigger function, right? So what we are doing in trigger function, I'm going to explain. Okay, let me just copy it here and let me just open a new tab and let me just paste it here. Okay, so this is our function log employee salary update, and the syntax is like it returns trigger, right? Because it is a trigger function, right? And then we in the begin, I'm giving just a print statement, raise info row label trigger calling, right? So whenever this function will be called by the trigger, so it is going to give a print statement. Also, in the trigger logic is if new dot employee salary not equals to old dot employee salary, right? So whenever there is a update on the employee salary, right, then we have to insert into employee salary update. Employee salary update is our log table, right? So employee salary update, and what are the things we are inserting in that? Employee ID, right? That can be fetched using old dot employee ID. Okay, old salary that can be fetched using old dot employee salary. New salary will be new dot employee salary and updated on the now. Now we'll print the timestamp when it is getting updated, right? And then end if, right? And return new. So this way we are going to create our trigger function. Let's create this trigger function. Okay, trigger function got created. Let's check our trigger in Object Explorer. So the in employee table, this is the trigger tab where we can see all the trigger on this table, employee table, right? So let's refresh this, right? So we can see our trigger got created, trigger employee salary update, and inside that we can see our function, right? Trigger function, right? Log employee salary update. So this is our trigger function, right? This is our trigger function, right? This is our trigger, right? So in Postgres, you basically create a trigger, right? And the trigger is always binded with a function. Okay, so you need to define a function as well. So all the logic which this trigger is going to execute is put into this function. Okay, and all the event when trigger will be find, those things are um, execute, those things are written in the create trigger definition, right? Like after update, right? For each row, which type of trigger it is, right? So these things are written in this create trigger statement, right? Now our row level trigger is defined, right? So we can execute and we can check the data, right? So let me just copy this queries here. Okay, so let me go here. So all our table got defined, trigger got defined, right? So this is my log table, which should be empty right now, right? So this is my table, log table, which is empty right now, in which trigger will make an entry, right? And this is my employee table, right? This is my employee table, right? Now, for the first employee ID, the employee salary is 80,000, right? Now, let's update it to 2 lakh, right? So, that entry, right, the change in the salary, that will be logged in our employee salary update, right? So, when we do this update, right? So I also wanted to explain you guys about that new and old keyword. What is new and old, right? So whenever you make an update, right? For example, I'm making an update for this first row, right? I'm updating the salary, right? So all the field of this row can be can be pointed out as old. Okay, so I have prepared an Excel to explain you guys. Okay, so suppose this is the first row, right, in which salary is 80,000, right, and I'm pointing this row as old. Okay, and then there is a new keyword which is pointing the new row. Okay, so in new row, if you see, all the first four fields are same except the salary is changing, right? So whenever I'm referencing, right, old dot employee ID, so that means I'm referencing the value will be 1. New dot employee ID, also the value is 1, right? Similarly, old dot department ID is 10, new dot department ID is 10, right? Similarly for other fields also, employee name, employee role. But when I refer old dot employee salary, so it is 80,000, and when I refer new dot employee salary, it is 2 lakh, right? So this is the feature which is used in the row label trigger, right? So in row label trigger, it executes one by one, right? So whenever you have update, right? So here I am updating just one row, right? But even if I update multiple row, so our will call trigger will be executed, as many time as many updates are done. Okay, so if it is making two rows are updated, right, so trigger will be called twice for each row, right? That is called row level trigger, right? That is the difference, right? So we'll see, if we call for one, if when we update for one row, how many times our trigger is getting called, and that we'll know using this raise info statement. Okay, so in print statement, whenever the trigger will call this no function, right, so this print statement will get printed, right? So that way we'll know. Okay, so we'll test that. Okay, but that is the concept behind old and new keywords, right, which we are using in this function logic here, right? If new dot employee salary not equals to old dot employee salary, right? That means for each row we are referencing this new and old employee salary, and since we are making update in employee salary, so new dot employee salary obviously will have the updated value, and old dot employee salary will have the old value, right? That is 80,000, right? So obviously 2 lakh is not equals to 80,000, then it will make an insert, right? And here I am referencing old dot employee ID, old dot employee salary, right? And employee salary and new dot employee salary for this new dot cell column, right? So this old dot employee ID I can also refer as new dot employee ID, right? Because here you can see old dot employee ID is also one and new dot employee ID is also one, right? So I can refer that. But just to follow the standard, all the fields which are not changing, we reference it as old, and the field which is changing, we reference it as new dot, right? So this is the way. Okay. Now let's execute this trigger. Okay, so this is the employee table, and in employee table I'm setting the salary as 2 lakh for this first row employee ID 1, right? So let's make an update. So whenever I'll run an update, so you can see there is a print statement row label trigger calling, and it is printing just one time, right? And then there is update of one row, right? Okay, so our update has been done, right? Let's first check our employee table. So this is the employee table in which the salary got updated to 2 lakh, right? And let's check our log table in which trigger should make an entry, right? So this thing trigger has made an entry. So ID is 1, right? So that will be just a sequence. And then employee ID is 1, right? Old salary was 80,000, new salary is 2 lakh. And this is the update done on this date, right? So our trigger is working good, right? So this is for a row label trigger, right? But what will happen if I'll make multiple updates, multiple row update, right? So let's make an update. So let's do an update of both this department 10. Okay, so let's make it as department ID, department ID, DEPT, department ID as 10. Okay, and let's set the salary as 3 lakh. Okay, so I'm updating for both this row department employee ID 1 and 2, which is in department 10, and the salary I'm updating as 3 lakh, right? So employee ID 1 as 2 lakh, employee ID 2 as 80,000, right? And I'm updating it as 3 lakh, right? Let's make an update. We'll see how many times our trigger should call, right? Since we are updating two rows, right? So our trigger will called for each row it will be called once, right? So two rows are updated, so trigger will be called twice after each row update, right? So let's check that. So how we'll verify that? If we run this update, right? So you can see info it is printing twice, right? That means our trigger function is called twice, right? That's why we have two print statement, right? Update is also two, right? So let's check the update is done or not on this table, right? So you can see our department ID 10, both employee has salary as 3 lakh, right? And now let's check our log table in which trigger has made entry, right? So you can see employee ID as 2, employee ID as 1, right? And old salary was 80,000 and new salary is 3 lakh, right? So this is the log table, right? Which is having the updates of the trigger, right? So I hope you understood the row level trigger, right? Now let's jump to the statement level trigger. Okay, so in statement level trigger, we'll be having both the log table would be same. If we want to do the update, right, similar to the row level trigger. Okay, so we'll do like this. Okay, so first we'll define a trigger, right, which should be a statement level trigger, right? So what will change? Only this keyword, right, for each statement, and then I'm referencing the new table as new tab and old table as old tab. I'll explain this what is new table and what is old table. Okay, so let's first define this trigger. Okay, so let me just copy and let me just first drop this trigger. Okay, so I'll just delete cascade. Okay, so trigger got dropped, right? So I'll just go here and I'll just first create the statement level trigger. So trigger name is same. Okay, so this is also after trigger after update on employee table, right? And I'm just adding referencing new table as new tab and old table as old tab for each statement. That's no differentiate it as a statement level trigger, and then I'm executing this procedure, right? Which we are doing executing that function. So our trigger got created, right? A statement level trigger. Now it's time to define the function, right? So in the function also there is a little bit change. Okay. So let me just copy and then I'll explain you. So this is my trigger function, right? So it is also returning trigger. So till here it is same. In raise info, I have given a message as a statement level trigger calling. Okay. So earlier it was row level trigger calling. Now since we are defining statement level trigger, so I'm giving a print as a statement level trigger calling, and then I'm inserting into this employee salary update, right? Old ID, old cell, new salary, and updated on this four field. And what I'm doing is joining new tab and old tab. Okay, so I'll explain you what is new tab and old tab. Okay, so let's first define this function. So our function got defined, right? Let's check the trigger. Let me refresh it here. Okay, so our trigger got defined and our trigger function is also defined, right? So we have binded this trigger function with the trigger, right? So this is a statement level trigger, right? So the difference between row level and statement level trigger is that for each update, statement level trigger will be called once only. Okay, even if there is one row update, then also trigger will be called just once, and even if there are multiple row update, then also trigger will be called once. Okay, so we'll see how we can do that. Okay, so we have this employee ID, employee table, right? And this is the row, right? Now let's update this. No, let's update anything. So let's update employee ID of employee ID employee ID of 4. Okay, So let's make as salary as 3 lakh, right? Right now it is 1 lakh 10,000, right? So we'll do the update and how a statement level trigger should act. Statement level trigger should be called once, okay? So even if there is one row or there is multiple row, right? And what is new tab and old tab? I'll update you when we have multiple row. I'll explain you when we have update in multiple rows. Okay. So let's first check this if it is working good. So I'm updating employee ID equals to 4. You can see there's a print statement, a statement level trigger calling, right? Update is 1, right? So for employee ID 4, I have updated the salary, right? So I'll check in the log. So you can see there's a entry employee ID 4. Earlier it was 1 lakh 10,000, now it is 3 lakh, right? And update is made on the state, right? So our statement level trigger is working good, right? Now let's make an another update where we have department as for department 30. Let's update the salary, right? So I'll give department ID as 30, right? And then I'm updating the salary as 3 lakh, right? So the statement level trigger, row level trigger was called twice, right? When there was more than one row update, right? Right? I mean, row level trigger was called for each row once, right? But a statement level will be called once. Even there are multiple rows update, a statement level trigger will be called once, and it is able to handle all the updates at once. Okay. So, what is it doing? What is the new tab and old tab? I'll explain you now. Okay. So, suppose I'm updating department ID 30, and for that I'm updating salary as 3 lakh, right? So, this row, this data, this is the old tab. Okay, because these two rows are affected, so this two is the old tab. Okay, so in a statement level trigger, suppose I'm updating the department ID 30, right? So this is the old record, right? These two are getting updated. So these are referred as old tab. And what is new tab is that all those rows, all the impacted rows, but the updated employee salary, right? So updated employee salary is how much? 3 lakh, right? So we'll update it to 3 lakh, right? So this thing will be updated to 3 lakh, right? Right. So that will be references. This is the old cell, right? And this is the new cell will be 3 lakh, right? So we can refer old tab and this is a new tab, right? So that is the difference. So when we update department ID equals to 30, right? Let's update that. So you can see a statement, even though there was update two rows were updated, but statement level trigger was called once only, right? And all the updates should be done, right? Let's check this log table. So you can see 5 and 6 entries are made, right? 5 and 6 was the employee ID for department ID 30, right? Earlier it was 1 lakh 10,000 and now it's 3 lakh, right? And update was made this, right? So that's how statement level trigger works, right? Statement level triggers are called once for complete update, and we can all the updated rows can be referred as new tab, and all the old rows which are going to get impacted are referenced as old tab, right? And this new tab and old tab where we are referencing here, right? So referencing new table as new tab and old table as old tab, right? And now using this new tab and old tab as kind of tables in the statement level trigger, right? So I hope you guys understood the concept of trigger in Postgres. Okay, so if you guys like this lecture, please subscribe my channel. Thank you.